In the heart of Westeros, two of the most powerful houses prepare for war. What would happen if House Stark attacked House Lannister? Ever since the moment King Joffrey took Ned Stark's head, there has been severe tension between House Stark and House Lannister. Robb has gathered his army in the north and is plotting an attack on Casterly Rock to get his revenge for what they did to his father. Robb has gathered his allies. Supporting him are House Tully, House Mormont, House Umber, Karstark, and House Glover. Supporting House Lannister is House Tyrell, House Frey, House Bolton, and House Greyjoy. The Lannisters have the higher numbers, but Robb has a deceiving and intelligent plan to take Lannisters and Casterly Rock by surprise. Robb, the king in the north, stood atop the hills, overlooking the vast expanse of the Westerlands. His direwolf Greywind rested beside him, and the banners of House Stark blew in the wind. Casterly Rock loomed before them, a colossal stone fortress carved into the cliffs beside the sunset sea. It had a reputation as an unyielding fortress as the rock itself. Robb's advisors had warned against this potentially audacious move, but he was resolute in his plan. If he could seize Tywin Lannister's home castle and take them by surprise, he would have a huge advantage against House Lannister. The map of Casterly Rock was sprawled across the table, illuminated by torchlight. Robb's plan was daring, a night assault on Casterly Rock, exploiting its weaknesses. The Freys, ever opportunistic, had pledged their support for him. Their river fleet would blockade the harbor, cutting off reinforcements from Lannisport. Robb had said, "Mother, we strike at the heart of the Lannisters. If we succeed, the realm will know that we are serious about this." Catelyn's eyes, with the loss of her husband still looming, she whispered, "The risks are very high. The rock is very hard to take, and if we fail, we will lose everything. This has to go as planned, Robb." Silently, the Stark forces advanced towards Casterly Rock. Robb, with his advisors and Greywind, advanced towards the walls. The air was tense, and as they got near, Robb's scouts reported back with some crucial intelligence. The Lannisters' sentries, very complacent with it being nighttime, had grown asleep and were not vigilant. It was an opportunity ripe for the striking. With a signal from Robb, the northern warriors sprang into action. Their movements were coordinated. They had scaling ladders raised against the walls, grappling hooks secured, and siege towers rolled into position. In the cover of darkness, they ascended the heights of Casterly Rock. The clash of steel rang out as the Stark forces clashed with the defenders atop the walls. Swords flashed, shields splintered, and the air was thick with the cries of fallen soldiers. But Robb Stark and the North remained determined, and amidst the chaos, Greywind prowled. With each snarl and swipe, he struck fear into the hearts of the Lannisters. The fighting raged on through the night, with each side going at each other. But as the first light of dawn painted the horizon, it became clear that victory was with Robb and the North. With a final thunderous assault, the gates of Casterly Rock were breached, and the Stark forces poured into the heart of the fortress. The Lannisters were outnumbered and outmatched, and ended up surrendering their remaining forces. By the end, Casterly Rock fell, and its banners were replaced with the sigil of House Stark. The cost of victory was high, but Robb Stark had taken Casterly Rock. Now, he turned his eyes towards King's Landing and Tywin, Cersei, and Jaime. At this point, Joffrey was still king and had not been poisoned by Olenna. So Joffrey is king, Tywin is hand, and Cersei is queen. So most of the Lannisters are in King's Landing and are shocked to find out that Robb had attacked their home castle in Casterly Rock. And they are scrambling to put together a formidable force and to defend King's Landing, as they know that Robb Stark is on his way south. Robb knew that the road ahead would be tough, which is why he knew that he needed more soldiers. He ended up taking his time, gathering some additional forces, some reinforcements, and with his loyal bannerman at his side, he set out on a long march south, his eyes fixed on revenge for his father. As they journeyed through the landscape of the Riverlands, Robb's army swelled in numbers as men and women from all walks of life flocked to his cause, drawn by the promise of not being under Lannister rule any longer. Along the way, he forged alliances with ancient houses, and he won the loyalty of some seasoned warriors. Meanwhile, within the walls of King's Landing, Joffrey and Tywin watched, with growing unease as reports of Robb Stark's advance reached their ears. The Lannister forces were formidable. They had been growing their numbers as well. They had an inanimate amount of gold, but they knew that Robb Stark was determined and that his forces were growing by the day. As the armies drew closer to King's Landing, tensions had reached a boiling point. Both sides prepared for the inevitable battle, fortifying their defenses and getting ready for the coming war. At last, the day had arrived. The field outside of King's Landing trembled beneath the weight of the soldiers marching. Robb Stark stood at the head of his forces, with his sword a beacon of hope for all who stood against the tyranny of King Joffrey and House Lannister. The Stark plan was pretty simple: breach the gates of King's Landing and use their overwhelming forces to win. However, they knew it wouldn't be as simple as walking through the front gates. So they devised a plan where a certain amount of soldiers, including Arya, would sneak through the back gates of King's Landing, as we saw in Game of Thrones when Tyrion swept and secretly came in the back of King's Landing. Their goal: get those reinforcements in to open the front gate. Now, if that didn't work, they did have a backup plan. They were going to scale the walls of King's Landing with ladders, and although this plan was a lot more risky, that was their best option. House Lannister also devised what they believed was a great plan. They wanted to lure Robb's army close to the walls of King's Landing, which then they would shoot flaming arrows behind them to entrap them and to keep them trapped near the city walls of King's Landing, which they would then rain down fire on them with arrows, spears, and other objects. The plan was simple. They wanted to trap the Stark army and get them in a vulnerable position. Here's how the battle unfolded. Robb, Jon Snow, and his army had started the attack on the front walls of King's Landing. Meanwhile, Arya and her soldiers snuck in the back and were coming around. Lannister forces unleashed arrows on the Northmen, many falling from these arrows. The Battle of King's Landing had reached its climax amidst the chaos and bloodshed. As the battle raged on, a shadow fell across the field, and Robb had found himself face to face with his greatest adversary, House Lannister. As Arya snuck in, they were able to open the gates, albeit just enough to get in some Stark soldiers. Those soldiers then were able to open the gate up more, and the Northmen were able to pour in to King's Landing. That is when, after many, many hours of fighting, Robb found himself face to face just outside the Red Keep with his greatest adversary, Jaime Lannister. Their swords clashed with a fury born of years of fury, and each blow striking ferocity against each other. And in the midst of this deadly duel, tragedy struck. A stray arrow, loose from the chaos of battle, found its mark, piercing Robb's armor and burying itself deep in his chest. With this gasp of pain, he fell. However, Jon Snow, fighting not far away, noticed this, and he went at Jaime. With lots going on around them in a heavy duel, Jon Snow cut Jaime's leg, weakening him. And after a few more minutes of fighting, Jon Snow landed a deadly blow to Jaime Lannister. So with Jaime and Robb both dead, Jon Snow led the North forces, and Tywin, emerging from the Red Keep, led House Lannister. Jon stepped forward to face Tywin, his expression a mask of icy composure. Tywin drew his own blade, Widow's Wail, ready to meet young Jon Snow. Their swords clashed, the sound echoing through the empty streets of King's Landing. Jon fought with the skill and determination that he learned from his father Ned. But Tywin was no ordinary adversary. Despite his age, his skill with a blade was legendary, honed through decades of experience on the battlefield. With each strike, he tested Jon's defenses, seeking out weaknesses with the patience. But for long moments, they battled in a deadly dance of death, neither willing to yield. But as the fight wore on, it became clear that Jon Snow's determination and youthfulness was unmatched. With each passing moment, he pressed this advantage, driving Tywin back. And then, in a moment that seemed to stretch out for eternity, Jon saw his opening, and he took it. With a swift and decisive strike, he disarmed Tywin, sending Widow's Wail clattering below. With a look of satisfaction and revenge, Jon pressed his sword to Tywin's throat. The hand of the king was defeated, and at that moment the balance of power shifted, the tide of the battle turning in favor of the North. Now, Tyrion, Cersei, and Joffrey were the only Lannisters that remained. Joffrey and Cersei pleaded for the House Lannister forces to continue fighting, but Tyrion felt another way. He pleaded with the soldiers and commanded them to lay down their forces and to surrender to save lives. Fortunately, the House Lannister forces agreed with Tyrion and surrendered, laid down their swords, and Jon Snow and the Northmen strolled through the gates of the Red Keep and accepted their surrender. Now they needed to decide what to do with Joffrey and Cersei. Beside Jon stood Arya. Her eyes were burning with a fierce determination of vengeance. Together they confronted Joffrey and his mother Cersei inside the walls of the Red Keep. Jon pronounced that Joffrey would need to face swift retribution for what he did to Ned. And in a single, swift motion, he drew his sword Longclaw and leveled it at the boy's throat. Arya, her face was also determined. With a steely resolve, she stood beside Jon, her gaze unwavering as she prepared to get justice for those who had wronged her family. With a defiant sneer, Joffrey was crying and bawling, begging for forgiveness, but Jon and Arya remained resolute. And then, with a single stroke, similar to how and what he had done to their father, Jon and Arya did the same to Joffrey. Jon's sword flashed through the air like lightning, severing the boy king's head from his shoulders in a swift and decisive motion. The echoes of Joffrey's final scream had reverberated through the streets of King's Landing, a chilling testament to the end of his tyranny and all he had oppressed. But the Stark siblings were not finished yet. With Cersei Lannister still alive, she begged for forgiveness. With determination and with some forgiveness, they marched her to the dungeons of the Red Keep, where she would await judgment for her crimes against the realm. And as the sun set on the horizon, casting its golden light across the blood-stained streets of King's Landing, the Stark banners flew high above the walls of the Red Keep, a symbol which many felt was justice and retribution for all who had faced King Joffrey's rule. And as Jon and Arya stood together, they knew that they had lost a great amount with Robb and everyone else and all their other soldiers, but they turned their eyes toward the future. They knew that the road ahead would be full of many challenges and uncertainty, but with their memory of their fallen brother Robb guiding their every step, they vowed to rebuild the Seven Kingdoms and rule with honor, integrity, and a steadfast commitment to justice for all. I hope you enjoyed this fun scenario if House Stark attacked House Lannister, vowing revenge for Ned's death. There is no factual basis for this, so it's more than anything just a fun scenario. I hope you enjoyed, and let me know if you'd like to see another what if scenario. Have a great day.